Hello, and welcome to Talking with the DM. I am the aforementioned DM. Today, wanted to sit down and talk about character development and specifically, obvious in D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, current edition, fifth. But actually, not even this current edition. This could some of what we talk about today can actually um, be applied to any character you're trying to create for any type of tabletop game, with the exception of when we actually start going into the character sheets and building that. That will be very specific to Dungeons and Dragons. But some of what I'll be talking about today, whether it's background and concept or any of those things, you can apply to any tabletop game that you're running. Hopefully, these things will help you. And as always, any links of the things that I show that I will add to our Discord, and you can find all of the stuff that we talk about on Talking with the DM in our Discord channel. So you get a chance, hop on the Discord channel, check that out. I usually try to get it up there within the day of actually streaming Talking with the DM. So this is a two-person operation, so bear with us as we get things moving as quickly as we possibly can. So with that, I'm just gonna jump right into it, and like last time, I am smoking hookah again today. All right, let's get started. So today, character development, and what does that mean? Well, hopefully by this point, you are uh, getting prepared to go into a game. Hey, how you doing, Beamroth? Good to see you. I hope I'm saying that right. Beamroth, Bemroth. I'll go with Bemroth unless you say otherwise. Um, but good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. So character development. What does that mean? Hopefully at this point you have decided to join a group for playing a tabletop game, and you're trying to figure out a couple of things probably at this point. Maybe you saw something on TV, something that you wrote about, or possibly just a concept that's been rolling around your head, and like this actually sounds like a cool concept for something like a character. Um, there's lots of different things that you can use as inspiration. Um, Myself, I always have like four or five different concepts of different types of characters rolling around the old noggin, and you just basically trying to figure out what it is that you're going to have the most fun with uh, playing, right? I'm always about as a player and as a dungeon master. I'm always about the most fun that you could possibly have. That's where you want to start with, right off the bat. But additionally, now that I'm on the other side of the table as a dungeon master, the one thing that you should also try to do is work with your DM as much as possible, whoever's running your game. Uh, that way, your character concept will fit in with whatever the dungeon master is trying to do for the game. Because sometimes, not that a character concept could break the game, it might be completely out there. So, I guess let's see. A good example of that would be, say for example, the new one of the new Dungeons and Dragons sets that just came out, campaigns, Rime of the Frost Maiden, right? That is a character. That is a concept that's in the northern part of Faerun, where it's cold, freezing, if you will, and if you had a character, say for example, a grung, right? A grung is a frog-like species. mostly living in very humid, hot, temperate, places, your DM might say, "Yeah, sure," but you're gonna have to deal with the fact that your character is normally from like a very hot temperate place. You're going to a frozen place. That's probably going to affect a couple of things for your character and game, and then you might not wind up having as much fun as you want, right? Um, Based on what that concept was that you had in your head. So it's a good idea, come up with, I always say, try to come up with 2 or 3 concepts that you're going to have fun with. Don't make them all similar, make them a little different. And then start with the one, obviously, that you think is going to be the most fun. Run that by your DM and see if they're cool with that concept, right? Concept is always the first way you want to go. You don't want to start jumping into building all a background and specifics until the concept is there and your DM is good with it. Trust me, you definitely want to make sure that you and your DM are on the same page. There's nothing worse than getting all excited about a character concept and then all of a sudden your DM says no, or you wind up having a lot of disadvantages against your character because of said character concept. Just work with your DM. I always stress that every time I have these talks. Talk with your DM so both of you wind up being happy. There's nothing worse than either you or the DM not being happy during a game. Probably be worse when the DM is not unhappy. I'm sure you've probably heard that when the DM smiles, it's too late. That's a very true, very true saying. In certain cases. So now you have your character concept. You worked it out with your DM. You're trying to figure out, okay, so what do I do next? Well, one thing, again, this is also this part is going to be very dependent on the type of player you are. Are you a story-driven player? Do you enjoy role play or the story aspect of the game, or are you like a min-maxer? Are you somebody who's just there to play the game, and story and role play are secondary, or maybe even tertiary? That is going to be very important. Figuring out, okay, you already know what type of player you are. But we'll start with the min-maxer first. If you are someone that the story is not what you're there for, you're there to kind of play the game. Story's fun, but you're there to kind of play the game, and you're maxing out what you can, which is what the min-maxer means. For those who don't know. Min-maxer is basically you're taking your numbers of your stats and you're putting them in the places that they're going to be the most effective, that kind of thing. And you're just there to play the game, right? It's just, I want to see if this character, now that it's all maxed out, min-maxed, is going to be the best type of this character possible. If that's the case, then sit down, and again, this is going to be another instance where you're going to be working with your DM, whoever's running the game. All right, say, okay, this is my character concept, the min-maxed character, this is what I want to do, and then your DM will offer suggestions that will also help you have a little more fun with your character as is, but add some depth to the character. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It could be, okay, you're from this place, and maybe what's your motivation? Why are you going adventuring, or you're going on this quest? Or is there a reason? Is there not a reason? And it could be very minimal. Doesn't have to be a lot of details, but those things will help flesh the character out a little more, and it will be good for the DM, because the DM is always going to look for, as a DM, I'm always looking for bits and pieces that I could use to make the game more fun for the player and for the group as a whole. So little things like that are immensely helpful for myself as a DM, and will be again, will hopefully give you a little more fun rather than here's my character, I put all the stats where they should be, let's play, right? Um, Now, other side of that, if you are a player that enjoys the story, that enjoys the role play, you are probably, the minute your character concept was developed and approved by your dungeon master, you started coming up with details like crazy on your background. As a DM, I love that stuff. I love all of those details. I love whatever you give me, I'm going to use in the game. You may not see it right away, but it will come up in the game at some point. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Fleshing out the backstory is the best. It gives a lot for the DM to work with for the game as a whole. And there are a lot of different tools now that are out there that I've been using with my players. A couple of things you could do again, as I was saying earlier. Character, you could start using. Think of your favorite TV shows. Think of your favorite movies. Something that's kind of called out to you, and kind of use that concept maybe. Or if you're someone who is extremely creative and you are a writer or you're or storyteller, you like coming up with stories, this is a perfect time for you to kind of flesh that out. I've seen people have no backstory, and then I've seen people submit 8 to 9 pages worth of backstory, right? It's and everything in between. So it's really going to be up to you. The DM will use whatever you give them, right? Any DM worth their salt will use it. Um, no, she didn't give me. My daughter. Yeah, Poopsie didn't give me 9 pages, but she gave me a chunk of stuff, which was good. Like I said, I want to use everything that I can. And if you're not somebody who, um, if you're not somebody who wants to work with the DM in a sense of having that kind of collaboration there, you kind of because you want the character really to be very much yours. There are a lot of different tools that you can use. One of my favorite ones that just recently came out is in the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. And in that, there is something called the Heroic Chronicle. Now, if you get the core books, like the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook, they do tell you um, how to help build a backstory and the kind of things you should try and look for. But the Heroic Chronicle in the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount is amazing because it's a bunch of tables. Tables are great, where they ask you to roll certain die, whether it's a d20 or a d10 or a d12. And based on that number that you roll, something will pop up on the Heroic Chronicle. And these things are basically like, do you have any allies? Do you have any rivals? Where do they live? What It even goes so much in depth as to what class they might be or what race they are, why they're your ally, why they are your rival, your enemy. How many parents? Do you have parents? How many parents do you have? Do you have siblings? What are their names? What is your favorite food? Do you have a secret in your past? These are really good tables that help you flesh out the character a little bit. And then, granted, as you actually play the game, you may actually start coming up with some of these things on your own. Things that will actually make sense within the story as the game goes on. So you're not held to that specifically, but it is something to think about. It's something and if those tables aren't something you want to use, again, there are so many things out there that that could inspire you to create that backstory for your character, right? Again, could be as lengthy or as minimal as you wanted, but trust me, putting together some kind of background makes your character less two-dimensional and kind of pretty much starts to bring it to life. And that's what you want to do, because while yeah, it is a game and it's going to be a lot of fun, part of the fun is doing this, is putting that together, is building that character, creating something that didn't exist a moment ago. That's fun. That's part of the fun. So definitely, especially if you're a min maxer and you're not somebody who really enjoy. You don't even have to enjoy role play, but come up with some kind of backstory to make your character pop. Essentially, I remember I used to do a lot of LARPing, live action role playing, and when I would put my characters together, I would actually I would do that. I would just, all right, so I would start with his parents. I start my character's parents. Like, okay, who are his parents? Where is he from? How does his environment impact him? His growing up. What did his parents do? Did he have any siblings? And then just kind of putting all that together, because when you start talking to people in the game, you know, these are kind of cues. These are things that you might actually say. It's like, oh, my sister was a fighter, and she was an expert in this, that, and the other thing, and blah 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 blah. When you're talking to a fighter, and that actually, again, that would sometimes drive the story forward, or it's just a little bit of flavor. That's a little bit of fun when you start reminiscing about a character that you actually just made up. Again, all part of the fun. All part of the fun. Oh yeah, yeah, hun. You are definitely, from when we started playing D&D together. You, by leaps and bounds, you have grown in the whole role playing and engaging and kind of putting that all together. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's, again, big part of the fun. So now you have a character concept. You're in a game. You're working with your DM. You're putting your backstory together. You put it together. Your DM, you send it into your DM. Your DM is essentially going to look over the backstory. If something, whether it's rules or something else in your backstory, doesn't fit well within the story the DM is trying to tell, I can tell you from my experience, I just adjust my story sometimes. I adjust that to fit more with the character concept that my players have come up with. But trust me, the DM will actually tell you, this is not going to work so much for this reason, or this isn't exactly the rules. But you know what? We'll homebrew a rule. We'll come up with a new rule that allows this, so it'll work well within the game. Because again, the DM is responsible not just for bringing a story to their players, but ensuring everyone is going to have fun and everyone's going to have a good time. I mean, there's again, one of the homebrew rules that I use, that is actually great, and 100% took it from Critical Role, is since I have 7 players, taking a healing potion or any potion is usually an action. With 7 players in the middle of a fight, that could make things drag out forever. So one of the things that we do, one of the homebrew rules, is taking a potion is a bonus action. Drinking a potion is a bonus action. Now, feeding it to another player, that is an action. That will absolutely be an action. But it's things like that, trying to make rules. And fifth edition is great about allowing this to happen for your game. It's about making it fun and making the story, moving the story forward. And if there's a rule or a number of rules that basically say you can't do this, you can't do that, and it's starting to screw with your fun, the DM can change it. Like that's the beauty of this new system. Um, Up until fifth edition, yeah, lots of DMs, lots of games existed where people were making their own rules that didn't work. But if you looked at the Dungeons and Dragons manuals or any of their books, it was always very much these are the rules and this is what you have to do. It wasn't until fifth edition where you very much so, as far as I can remember, that they were, hey, no, it was actually in the rule book. If this rule is going to, kill somebody's fun or kill the fun of the entire group, you as the dungeon master absolutely can change it to fit your group's needs. Right? And I found that very refreshing. So yeah, it's really gonna be up to the DM. That's the DM's responsibility to make sure that happens. Um, and again, it's that collaboration, that working together, ultimately will make everything more fun. Now you have your character concept. You're starting to build a character, put the backstory together. Your DM has told you, okay, this will work, that won't work, or 100% your backstory is great. We're gonna go with that. Wonderful, let's do it. Now it's time to actually put the character together. What does that look like? Well, now going into, we're gonna, as a perfect example, we're actually going to use Dungeons and Dragons. Um, so with that, let's actually pull up character sheets. Now, as you can see, with character sheets, you can just very quickly, you can actually get into, go into Google, Google, D&D character sheets, and you'll get a million options, right? But first and foremost, I can't speak English. What we're gonna do is right into Dungeons and Dragons. You go to their main website. Right there, you have tabletop resources and a role-playing game resources, character sheets. Okay, super helpful. Some of these are purchased, some of these are free. And for the 5th edition character sheets, right there, for free. You click this link and it will actually, a zip file will pop up and you can download the zip file and it will have a number of things for you, sheets for you to use. Let me see, I will very quickly pull those up. I can show you what it looks like. All right. All right. So this is part of it. This is your character. This is where you're actually going to fill out all of those cool things that you came up with for your backstory, right? Your character name, your age, height, all that good stuff. This is where you're actually going to be putting all that stuff in. You're going to have what they look like. Usually, interestingly enough, this is where I would usually draw like a little picture, if I can, of what my character looks like. Allies and organizations. Your character might be part of an organization coming into the game, or as the game progresses, you find characters. Um, yeah, they're definitely that's yeah, absolutely, absolutely, Bemroth. It's there's so much less clutter. It's great. Um, let's see. Let me open up. Let me actually find the full character sheet. Yeah, there we go. And so here you can actually see this is, I believe, yeah, this is all of it. So there's about a full character sheet, quote unquote sheet, will be about 4 to 5 pages long, depending on certain things. Class and level. Now, again, I always advocate. Um, in my campaign, we use D&D Beyond, but I always say you should print up your own sheet and have it next to you all the time. One, D&D Beyond, that's an online resource. If internet goes out, if the website goes down, you don't want that to stop your gameplay, right? So they basically have a printed out sheet next to you. It also helps you find things a little faster than maybe you might find them online. But and a lot of this is made to be now in this one, it's actually fillable via the computer. You can just pop the stuff in and you can change it as you will. But again, you're gonna have it next to you. I would print out the blank sheet. Um, I would only fill in things that are not likely to change, like probably your character name, and everything else leave blank. When you print it up, it's right next to you, and you're using pencil to erase things and change things as needed. But here's your character sheets. It has everything you're going to need, and we're going to get into all of this stuff in a moment, but I just want to show you a little bit like what the character sheets is. These are your skills here, what you're proficient in, as well as your pluses that you'll add to rolls. Your saving throws are your hit points. These things right here are part of your backstory. We're going to get into those as well. Personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws. These are concepts that help to round out a character. And again, I was talking about rounding out characters. This is a good way to do that. And again, we'll get into that. Temporary hit points. Name. This is like your attacks and your spell casting. Kind of like maybe in here you usually put in the things that you use the most. Not everything, obviously, but the things you use the most. Features and traits. Other proficiencies in language, like if you have proficiency in tools, things like that. Here's your equipment, right? What your equipment is, all that kind of stuff. And then again, showed this just before. This is kind of your backstory, more or less. This is your spellcasting sheet. If you are a spellcaster of any kind, this is actually going to be very important for you. And again, we'll get into depth, but cantrips, your spell levels, your slots, how many totals. These change as you progress. And then here's where you'll actually, kind of tally out when I use my spells, blah blah blah. Yeah, and again, this may expand to 4 or 5 sheets depending on your backstory, depending on equipment, depending on things that you get in the game. Hey, Sensei Supla, Us, good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Um, so we're talking about right now. We're talking about the character sheets for D&D. We talked a little about character development, and we're just kind of moving forward with resources right now at this point. So these are. Oh, that's great to hear, Sensei. Good, good. We're doing good. I'm doing good. Turkey Day was came and went, and we're still eating some of that, so things are good that in that sense. But yeah, doing good, Good. Thanks for joining again. Appreciate it. So yeah, so that's your basic character sheets. Um, Character sheets for Dungeons and Dragons, and again, you can find this for free in on the D&D website. Um, Additionally, what's interesting, so starter set character sheets. This is similar also, but the starter set comes with 5 pre-made characters. You can get those sheets there as well. Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League, for those who don't know what that is essentially you can create a D&D character and play that character with different groups in the Adventures League across the country, and sometimes across the world if they allow it, depending on certain things. So that's what Adventurers League is. So yeah, additional character sheets. This actually sends you to a site to actually buy them. This is actually, you can buy packets of blank character sheets, and that's what that is. But here, pre-generated warriors, pre-generated scoundrels, pre-generated mages. These are really good if you are completely stumped as to what you want to play, right? This will give you a really good idea of, okay, I don't know what to play. Let me take a look, and then you can just open these up, and you can actually see what these characters have. You can see, and then maybe that might spark something in you on building the character. So yeah, so this is a pretty good, very good resource. Basic rules for if you've never played. That's another good thing. That's for free. And then of course what Wizards is always going to do is going to try and hook you in if they haven't hooked you in already. Here's our website, here's our newsletter, here's our all that good stuff. But again, very good resources. You should use them. All right. So now we've talked about the basic character sheets. This is what a D&D character sheet is. Let's take it to the next level. And again, this is just from a Google search. You decide that you really want to bring your character to life. And you want your character drawn, but say you have no artistic abilities. You can go on many sites. I pulled up Fiverr because this was one of the first ones that I saw. And you can actually pay somebody, pretty expensive, but you can pay someone to draw your character on a special character sheet that they've created. Let me see if I can. It's larger. Yeah. And it will have all of the things that a normal character sheet will have, so you can actually fill all that good stuff in. But yeah, it is. This is, some people can actually do this themselves, which I highly recommend. If you are artistic and you have the ability to do something like this, this helps bring your character to life for you. And this is something that you should really, I would recommend doing if you can do it yourself. If you have the money for it, by all means, if that's something that you think you need to do, go for it. Like, who am I to say no? Not something I would do personally. It is pretty expensive, but some people do it. I mean, these are really. I mean, the artist here. I mean, it's just beautiful artwork. And it kind of really brings that character to you, brings them to life. And again, so it's just something to think about. Again, you could just like I said, you could just download the actual regular D&D character sheet, and then just on another piece of paper have your character drawn, or try to draw it out. But again, this is just something just doing a Google search for D&D character sheets. You will find lots of people. I mean, oh yeah, so look at this. If you're a spellcaster, this is what the spellcaster sheet looks like, right? Beautiful work. It is beautiful work. But again, not for everybody. Not everybody would do something like that, and that's fine. Uh, Now another interesting thing I saw was, again, this is more. These are also um, these are all personalized character sheets. Again, something that you can find, uh, and it does cost money, but it is very specific to the type of class you're playing, as well as your character's picture, front and center on the sheets. I mean, these are just, if you just look at these, it helps to immerse you in your character's background. It helps bring your character to life for you and for the other players as well. Um, so again, these are just, hopefully these will help to inspire you to kind of think about what you want your character to look like, or what their class is going to do. Um, but these are some really nice ones. Uh, these are really great. Yeah, these are absolutely, these are amazing artists. Um, but now here's the other thing that I found, that I actually really enjoyed, uh, doing this doing this search. I found D&D character sheets for players with dyslexia. Um, Now, I myself, I have a very mild form of dyslexia, and it has to do mostly with numbers. But there are those that dyslexia, it affects them very much, to the point where it is very different. Just looking at the regular character sheet is very confusing for them. So the people who actually developed this, they developed it. Let me see if I can actually find a picture, a better picture of it. Um, hmm. So yeah, it's color coded. It has a number. It has everything a D&D character sheet has. Um, and you can actually download it for free, which is great. So if you have players that suffer from dyslexia, uh, again, I think as a DM you also want to offer lots of different options for your players. I'm not saying that as a DM you should go out of your way and just spend a lot of money on the very personalized character sheets. I think that's more of like a player decision. But as a DM, probably a good thing to have would be blank character sheets, the D&D ones, but also some alternatives, because not everybody might fool with the regular ones. Might, to help them play the game or be more immersive or have a little more fun, they might look at it a little differently. Um, so yeah, so again, all of these links of everything that I'm showing will be on our Discord, especially this one, because you can, as I said, you can download the sheets for players with dyslexia for free. Right. All right. So now, another thing that might help you out with your character concepts. Something that I use very frequently, um, is this site, fantasynamegenerators.com. Now, why would I need this, you ask? Well, the reason you would need this is you've come up with a character background, you've come up with a great backstory, you've worked with the DM, and now the thing that's killing you is, what do I call myself? What do I call my character now? Um, and this site not only has fantasy names, and as you can see, a million type, a million is exaggerating, but a lot of fantasy name: aliens, Amazon, Anani, uh, yeah, Enthusai, elf, elemental, dwarf. I mean, the list goes on. Hey, let's go to the next one. Real names. Look at that. So names from different cultures. You can find Egyptian names, ancient or modern, Japanese, Ottoman, Pakistani, right? Okay, I don't know where I'm from, or maybe my town is very small and it's not actually on a D&D map. What would I call it? I don't know. Maybe you go to the place names, right? And you see continent, coral reef. This is a really good resource for DMs, especially if they're building their own world from scratch. Magic shop names, magic school names, plaza. I mean, the list goes on. And then you have other names, herbs and spices, holy books, pop culture, description generators, right? You're having a hard time finding a description for a building or a place. There you go. This will generate random descriptions that could help you. Um, and if you scroll further down, look at that World of Warcraft name generators, right? Uh, Diablo name generators. If you're trying to name your video game characters and you need help, this place helps you. I mean, it's crazy. Now, I'm gonna click on the Dungeons and Dragons one because that's what we're talking about right now. Yeah, it's got Star Wars too. Yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. If you scroll down, it breaks it down by each race that Dungeons and Dragons has. Um, it's crazy. It helps you, but it's there's so many options here. It's great. Um, so we'll go back. Yeah, so Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, right? Starfinder, Mass Effect, Rifts, okay, Game of Thrones, Warhammer. I mean, look at this. Lord of the Rings. If especially if you're trying to do like Lord of the Rings and you need I'm Hammershot, son of Hammerthorn, some son of Ironhelm, son of whoever. There you go. You can get all those names right there. Star Trek name generators, Stargate. I mean, look. I mean, there's so many things here. So yeah, fantasy name generators.com. And again, this will be up in our Discord. The Witcher, Horizon, Star Wars, and not even just regular Star Wars race names. The Old Republic name generators. I mean, look at this. Oh yeah, yeah. This it goes on at Marvel, DC, Doctor Who, Harry Potter. I mean, if this isn't your go-to name generator, I don't know what you're doing, right? This is the one. Weapon names, armor names, pet names. Like, look at all this. My Little Pony names. I mean, come on. What are you doing if you're not using this site? Come on, it's crazy. Um, so yeah, this is a great one uh, to use. So, but yeah, this all of this can help inspire you. All of this can help you figure out more details about your character. You're not sure your character's name is. Uh, hell, this could even if you know what your character's name is. What are your siblings' names? What are your parents' names? What was your best friend's growing up name? I mean, like all of this stuff here is right there to help, and it's great. So you should use it. Um, all right, so let's break it down a little bit, right? So you've come up with a great concept, you come up with a great background, come up with names, you know where you're from. Your DM and you and your DM have worked together. Your character concept is approved. You're going together, you're getting it all together. Now comes the task, not daunting, but the task of actually putting a character together. And that means rolling up stats and figuring out tiny little details. And as I said, this one is going to be very, very specific to D&D. And because I always love visual aids, uh, D&D Beyond does have a really good um, character building method here. And as you go into it, and again, once one of the things that D&D Beyond does initially is it just gives you like the basic rules of Dungeons and Dragons, but you won't have access to all of the races. You won't have access to all of the feats and skills and things like that unless you're already in a campaign and your DM has that available. Your DM shares that with the group. So all of these things you can do. You don't need D&D Beyond to do it. You can actually, if you pick up any of the D&D books, you will be able to do everything I'm about to show you here. The actual core books, like the Player's Handbook, and your DM should be telling you what books you'll be using for the game. Some dungeon masters will say, "Oh, we're only going to use the races in the Player's Handbook." Some, like me, will say you have access to practically every race that exists. So now you're like, oh my god, I could be anything now. What do I do? Uh, as long as you have the books, and your DM should be sharing, again, responsibility of the DM, sharing that knowledge with their players, sharing those books when they can. Right now, again, in the world the way it is, everything online, everything digital, I'm sharing all of this stuff with my players through D&D Beyond. None of them have to pay for anything extra. The cost is already covered by me. So they have access to the player's handbook. They have access to the books that they are using for our games. If there's a book that I own that is not going to be used in the campaign, they don't have access to it. But everything I'm about to show you, if you pick up or have purchased any of the D&D books, you will be able to do everything I'm about to show you right now. This is just a very simple visual aid that will hopefully help you build that out. All right. So I'm just going to larger. And this is right here is this is more specific to D&D Beyond, standard, quick build, randomize. If you're playing with a DM like me, we're going to do things standard, and I'm just going to click the show help text because it is helpful. Right. This pretty much goes into what you're going to be seeing in the next page. Creating the character. We kind of talked about this already. Your character level, your preferences, that kind of. All right. So now we're building a character. Yeah, we're gonna call this guy Lebowski because why not? All right. And a lot of this, again, this is very specific to D&D Beyond, but your DM will be telling you, oh, we're going to be using homebrew content. We're going to be using stuff from Critical Role or these specific books, Magic and Eberron. Don't worry about Rick and Morty. And this is also very specific to the new book that just came out, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. We're actually going to click those on because we're going to see what those options are. Advancement type. Okay, this is an interesting thing that you and your DM, the group itself, would have already discussed going into the campaign. How will your characters be leveling up? Will they be leveling up through XP or through milestone, which is two very different things. So, XP monsters have and encounters have a certain amount of XP, assigned to them, and after a battle and after a fight, you gain experience points, and those experience points will help you level up. Milestone is the XP is taken out of the equation, and you level up essentially by completing certain tasks and certain storylines within the game. And once those are complete, or you finish things in a certain area, your DM will let you know, congratulations, you all leveled up, right? That's a conversation that you would have already had before the game had started with your DM and your entire group to figure out how you wanted to do it. With 7 players, yeah, we're milestone. We do milestone because I can calculate all the XP, but it will take them forever, and I would have to throw them lots and lots of monsters, lots and lots of encounters. Uh, Not that would fit the story, but just for the hell of it to make sure that they leveled up on, in a timely fashion. And you don't want that to ruin the story or the gameplay itself. So milestone works for a large group. XP, I would say if you have anywhere between 3 to 5 players, XP is still very good to use. You start getting upwards of 6, 7 players, hell, 8 if you're crazy. Milestone's the way to go, right? Hit point type. I always choose manual because you're constantly changing your hit points as you level up. Feats and multi-class requirements, absolutely. What that means is, and we'll get more into depth, feats, you have the ability to adjust certain things in the game when you hit a certain level. And one of those things, you can actually make some of your abilities better, or you can take a feat which gives you other abilities. We'll get into that in a minute. And multi-class requirements, that's if you want to be more than one class. Say you want to be a fighter rogue or a barbarian fighter. That's what multi-classing is. That's a totally different. I think I have to do a whole other talk with the DM just on multi-classing because it can get very crazy. Show level scaled up spells. Again, that's more specific to D&D. Here's another thing: encumbrance. All right. As a player, as you're gaining money, as you're gaining weapons and items and armor, uh, again, this will be a discussion you and your group will have. Do we want to be encumbered by all of this weight, which will absolutely have detriments and effects in the game, or do we just want to be like, it's magic, it's D&D, and not be encumbered by any of that crap? That's a conversation that you would have. This one we're gonna actually use encumbrance because that's gonna be funny. Ignore coin weight again. That's another conversation that you probably would have had. Um, Ability score modifier display. This is more a preference than anything else. I'll explain it when we get to it. It's better to actually show you than I try to explain it. Character privacy again. We're gonna make it private. That's beyond. So now choosing a race. I have all of my content in here, so you're gonna see exactly how many D&D races you can play. That's a lot there. Uh, and even some of those races have sub races, right? Yeah, actually, absolutely correct, Bemrod. That encumbrance will actually, it adds another level to the game. Whereas if you kind of just ignore those rules, uh, the game progresses, obviously, but adding that is a very, very interesting level. It's like, okay, we can't carry everything around. You can't be have the fighter that has like the 2 great swords on their back, the one long sword back there, 5 axes on this side, and a couple of short swords on this side, dagger, bandolier. At some point, that stuff is going to weigh you down. Bag of holding is probably the way to go. But now, maybe that's a whole other quest, right? How do we get a bag of holding? Where can we get it? Is it rare in your game? Is it hard to find? Is it easy to find? Can you pay somebody to do it? Yeah, it definitely brings a new level to that. Um, So let's see. Did they finally fix bag of holding? Um, they fixed it in the sense that there is actually a limit to how much the bag of holding can hold. Um, it is I don't remember. It's a certain amount of cubic feet. Um, but again, that's something you could change. You could change in your game if you wanted to. You could make it hold less. You can make it hold more. They have a couple of different types of bag of holding. There's the handy haversack, which basically is much smaller. It holds less than the bag of holding, but it does have smaller pouches that are like mini bags of holding on the side. Again, doesn't hold as much, but depending on what your character may want, they can do that. There's the portable hold. There's a couple of different things that they've done. So the bag of holding is not your only option anymore. Um, but yeah. So getting back to the races, as you can see, there are so many races. There's so many things that you could play, and the elf itself has 5 sub races, right? Asimar has 3 and 1 variant. You could even be a bugbear. I really do enjoy the introduction of quote unquote monstrous races. Um, I really enjoy this half orc, halfling, 2 sub races of that. Lizard folk, orc. I mean, so many races, right? But this is where you would actually decide and pick, and this is going to be dependent on your, what you decided as your character background and your concept, all of that good stuff. Your DM would have thrown some of these suggestions at you, right? So let's, you know what? Let's pick something that is pretty much not the norm. You know what? Let's build a Kenku. Kenku is essentially a bird person. But the interesting thing about them is they don't have a language of their own, which is great if you play it correctly. So now you have this, you get these racial traits, um, but because of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, you can actually change some of these things, right? Based on your backstory rather than your race. You are no longer, thanks to Tasha's, um, now officially. Again, people have done this, in the past, homebrewing their own campaigns, but you are no longer bound to the racial traits if your background is different. It basically dictates something different. So, for example, if you were a dwarf raised by orcs, right? As strange as that may sound, right? Say that's your character concept. That's your background. Let's go to dwarf real quick. Um, Change race. Uh, let's say dwarf. You're a mountain dwarf, and you were raised by orcs, right? Constitution, Dark Vision, Dwarven Resilience, Dwarven Combat Training, Stone Cunning. See this right here, Dwarven Combat Training? That wouldn't come into play if you were raised by orcs. So you would go into the Origin Manager, and you would see, here we go, Origin Proficiency replaces Dwarven Combat. Right, exactly, Bemroth. Or Gith raised by humans. Right, exactly. All of this helps you fine tune your character more to the backstory that you want, that you came up with, and now you'll have even more fun because it is now the concept is more, and you're not kind of pigeonholed into these racial traits here, right? Or trying to come up with some kind of reason. Okay. So let's go back to Kenku real quick, and right? Dexterity, wisdom, expert forgery, Kenku training, and mimicry, right? What does Kenku training mean? That means you are proficient in one of these 2 things. So definitely stealth because they don't like to be seen. And you know what? We're gonna make ours. You know, my character concept was, hey, let's make him a rogue. Let's make this Kenku a rogue. The sleight of hand is going to help. Both of these things will actually help a rogue. Um, and then again, all of these things you can do. You don't need D&D Beyond. If you have any of the books, you can completely do all of this with the books. Right? Your ability score, and that's because of the racial traits. You'll come up with the age. It tells you right here. They can be between 12 and 60. Alignment. Now, this is a thing that I love talking about alignment in the sense that I think it needs to be, you need to have more discussion about alignment um, with your groups. Now, I am of the mind that your alignment shouldn't drive your character should drive your alignment. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is, for D&D's purposes, say you are chaotic good or chaotic neutral, right? And that's how you want to start the character. Depending on what happens in the story, that can absolutely change. And sometimes you may start out with in that category of, let's say, for example, chaotic good. Good chaotic good character I always like to talk about is Wolverine. Wolverine is absolutely the most chaotic good character that I've seen in a long time. And I usually use that as the example. But you know, sometimes when, for example, during the time when he was training with samurai, right, his alignment, he was trying to fix. He was trying to train himself to not be so chaotic. And in that instance, he was no, you know, during that training process, he was no longer chaotic good. Um, and it's always those actions that dictate the alignment, right? Um, there are some people who, when they pick their alignment, they say, "Oh, I have to stick to it." Paladins, for example, are an example of a character class that sometimes you have to stay a certain alignment in order to keep serving the god that you serve. And in those instances, that very much drive is going to drive, but there can be things in the game that change that. And if it does change it, that has repercussions for that paladin, especially if the god demands that they stay that alignment, right? So I always tell my players, don't let the alignment drive you. If you find, especially during the story, if you find like things are changing and you're doing something a different way, don't feel like, oh, I have to play my character different now rather than the way it's progressing naturally. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just allow these things to happen. Trust me, your DM, again, DM responsibility is to make sure that they are tracking all of these things that are possibly changing your alignment, and how will that have repercussions in the game. Right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Allow the character to be organic. Um, you know, that's again, it's if you start letting the alignment drive the character rather than the actions that the character takes in the game, the character then just becomes a very two-dimensional character and is no longer, it's going to sound funny to say in a fantasy game, but no longer realistic. Um, I like a little realism in my fantasy. Uh, so that's my opinion on alignment. Others don't feel the same way, but I think in order to have the maximum amount of fun and to tell a really good story, that's the way alignment should be played. You should, and again, based on your backstory, pick an alignment. You know that fits the backstory, but don't think that that might not change because it could. It really could. All right, then your size, your speed, basically how fast you are. Um, expert forgery. These are all things that come with being this race of character, the Kenku. So now you're going to choose a class. You're going to figure out, again, based on your backstory, what it is that you wanted to do. And we said that we were going to go with Rogue. Now, you can see here, from the original, when the original D&D game came out, there was not all of these options. And now you have more. We're going to stick with Rogue for now, because that's going to fit the backstory I created for this character. Right? As we said, this character's name is Lebowski. Uh, so your hit die, and again, a lot of what your hit die, what that means is, in this case, it's 1d8. That is the die that you will roll every time you level up to give yourself hit points. Right? This is how your character progresses. This is how they grow. I subscribe to re-rolling ones because there's nothing that kills fun more than leveling up and rolling a 1 and you only get 1 hit point for leveling up. I think that's bullshit. So I always tell my players re-roll ones, but that is what the hit die mean. And then you have your maximum hit points. Interesting, and we'll get to your actual like strength, your modifiers, and all of that. But you will also be adding, if you have a modifier to your Constitution, whatever that modifier is, +1, +2, +3. You will add that to your hit die roll, and then that will help you you will add that to whatever your base hit points are. In this case, it's 12. Okay. So yeah. So as I said, hit points, proficiencies. Yeah. So now this is basically what your character can do. They are proficient in a specific thing because they've trained in it or were raised to do this. That's what these proficiencies are for. So we're going to go through them very quickly. We're going to say that Lebowski is really good, especially because they can mimic voices and sounds. That they're pretty good in deceiving people. We're also going to say that to try and get away from people, they are probably very acrobatic. Kenku are not exactly intimidating. They could be, but we'll also say that Lebowski is pretty good at persuading people to do things. And because they are also always in fear of someone catching them, probably pretty perceptive, right? So now we have those things are always going to, these specific things are going to be a little better than my other skills. I can use other skills, but these things are going to be a little better for me to use. You're going to have a much better chance of using these specific skills. Expertise. What does that mean? As a rogue, you get to be an expert in certain things. We're going to say one of those is thieves' tools. Why not? They're rogue. Okay? And then the other thing will probably be stealth. Lebowski doesn't want to be caught. So Lebowski is very stealthy. And then sneak attack. Rogue gets sneak attack. And again, these are once you pick your class, these are the things that the class gives you. If you are using Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, you have optional features. And some of these things, and this one for the rogue, you actually only get one, but as you level up, you may get more. This one is an additional feature. And again, your DM will tell you if you can use these features or not, but this one is steady aim. If you don't move from your last turn, you can use this to give yourself advantage on your attack, which is super powerful. But again, the detriment is wherever you were standing last turn, you can't move. So it's it might take something away, but it gives you something also. Um, and that essentially your is your class. Here again, this is very D&D specific, but this is where you will actually increase when you increase your levels. You would just basically do this, and as you can see, as you hit certain levels, you gain more things. You gain more options, right? Um, Talking about now, if once you hit level 4 for a rogue, and for different classes, it's different things. Um, you do we touched on this before. I said I would explain it, and this is the perfect place to explain it. Ability score improvement. So the very next thing we're actually going to get into will actually show your strength, your dexterity, your intelligence, and these are things that influence your rolls. Show how well you can do things in certain areas. Um, when you hit level 4 for rogue, and again each class is different, you can either improve those scores, right? You can either put 2 points into one of these abilities, right? Charisma, Constitution, Dex, Intelligence, Strength, or Wisdom. You can choose both to be one of these, like for example, Charisma, right? Or one or the other, Charisma and Constitution. This would be up to you to decide based on some of the abilities that you have. Increasing these scores will help you do more things. Constitution, for example, as I said before, the higher your Constitution, the more hit points you will actually be able to get in between levels. So maybe that's something you want to do. But maybe you don't want to be hit a lot, so you would put 2 into your dexterity, which makes you harder to hit. It increases your armor score, your armor class score. Now, say you liked where your scores were, you didn't want to improve your abilities at all. You can alternatively choose a feat. And again, these feats are very different for different people. But each of these gives you something different. Now, all right, so Lebowski is a rogue. They are a Kenku. Let's see. We're probably not a grappler. Probably not somebody who jumps on people and tries to grapple them. I don't think Lebowski's is that kind of person. Um, but we probably will say, based on the actual real Lebowski, we're gonna say Lucky is one of no. You know what? I'm not gonna pick Lucky. Lucky is one of the stronger feats. We're gonna go with, let's see, definitely not a pole arm master. Um, you know what? Lebowski throws daggers, so we're gonna make Lebowski a sharpshooter. Okay, but what does that mean? When you pick one of these feats, you'll actually be able to see what it does on D&D Beyond. In the player's handbook, you will actually be able to see these. There's a list of them with all the descriptions. Attacking at long range doesn't impose disadvantage, which is very good for someone who does ranged attacks. You don't want to worry about being at a disadvantage on attacks. Your ranged weapon attack ignores half cover and 3/4 cover, which is really good. Because cover in D&D will actually increase someone's armor class, makes it harder to hit. This will ignore any cover that they're behind. Well, most of it. And then before you make an attack with a ranged weapon that you are proficient with, you can choose to take a -5 penalty to the attack roll, and if it still hits, you add +10 to the damage, which is deadly if used correctly. So basically, if it takes 15 if 15 is the armor class, that's what you need to roll to hit another person. And you roll it, and you say, before you roll, you say, I'm going to take sharpshooter, right? And you say, okay, the DM says, go for it. You roll, and your total is 21 -5. This comes out to 16. You still hit the person. Now you can add 10 to the damage. That's a great feat right there, right? especially coming in at level 4. That's a pretty good feat to get it when you hit. So now this is you determine ability scores, right? So as I said before, we chose manual for Lebowski, and we're going to put manual, right? And so what does all this mean? Now again, everything here when you roll, and I'm going to get to rolling in a second. When you roll, you're going to add these in, and these will tell you what you can do in certain areas, right? So the way I actually roll, and DMs will do this differently. All DMs will do it differently. I'll tell you how I do it. You and the DM together, you will actually take 4d6, okay? And you're going to roll 4d6. You're going to take the lowest number and put it to the side, and you're going to re-roll ones. I am a very generous DM. I don't like people starting out with very, very shitty rolls, unless that's how they want to start. Right? I always give my players that option. But that's how some DMs will do that. Some others will roll very differently, ask you to roll differently. But that's how I do it. 4d6, re-roll ones, take out the lowest. Now when you take out the lowest, now you add the 3d6 that you have left, and that number you put it to the side, you write it down, and you're gonna do that, as you can see from these boxes, 6 times. Right? Once you have those scores, you are now going to put them in these boxes where you think your character needs them. And again, when I was talking earlier about min-maxers, this is the part that they love, right? Because they will do everything they can to put the scores in, the numbers that they've added through the rolling, in these boxes where it will make the most impact, right? So for Rogue, a very good thing to have is high dexterity and high constitution. All the other stats are good for certain things, either for certain skills, but for Rogue, those are usually the ones you want to put. But if you're not a min-maxer, and you're a person who loves the story and came up with this very elaborate backstory of that they say Lebowski is stupidly clumsy, right? They would not have a high dexterity, right? Not at all. And maybe they were sickly growing up, so they would not have a high constitution. Even though, as a rogue, those are the best things to put points into. Again, it is completely up to you how you actually put that in for your character. So we're gonna make up some numbers, and using the backstory I just came up with for Lebowski. Lebowski's dexterity is going to be 10 because he's very clumsy. His constitution is probably not going to be great. We'll say that he rolled a 12 for that, which is about pretty. 10 is average. Actually, no. We're going to say because he's sickly, we're going to say he rolled a 9 on that. We're going to give him a detriment for that. His strength, also not great, so probably that 11 we rolled. And he probably had to get through life up until this point, kind of, quote unquote, talking his way out of things, especially as a Kenku, is very hard because all they do is mimic. They don't have a language of their own. But his charisma probably got him through most things. So that was probably that 16 that we rolled. Not the most wise person, or actually we'll say not the most intelligent person, so that was probably that 10. But his wisdom, in order to get out of all of the crazy stuff, that was probably that 17, right? So that's what a story-driven spread of those numbers would kind of look like. Granted, a min-maxer is probably cringing looking at this right now. They're probably going, no, put the 16 in Dex, the 17 in Dex and the 16 in Constitution. What are you doing? But this is based on my story. So as a player, I would be happy with this because I would love to see what happens to my character with scores like this. That's the story. It's about the story for me. But for somebody else, it would be different. Min-maxer would be different. They would put it in there, and that way they can do the best they can in the game when it comes to playing. Uh, so yes, hun. You have a question? Oh, that's down. Oh, are you saying? Oh, that's you. Okay, yeah, the min-maxer. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, and now this would be the part where you are going to put your backstory, right? Background. Now, you do have options for your background. These things also give you certain skills based on the background you choose. Criminal acolyte, charlatan, criminal spy, entertainer. I'm going to say there's a lot of it. Hermit, knight, noble. We're gonna say that Lebowski grew up on the streets, which is why they turned to kind of a life of crime. Now you could pick criminal spy, but that tends to be more like you were part of like either an organization or you were very planned and precise type of criminal. Um, Urchin is you were kind of raised on the street, so orphan, you're poor, nobody to watch over you. Um, so now again, your proficiencies, all of these things that you pick will now you have a greater chance of achieving the things using these skills, right? Animal handling, arcana, athletics. Um, we'll say absolutely survival. Growing up on the streets, survival is probably a good thing to have. And we'll also say probably performance, right? Needed to make some money on the street. When you couldn't pick those pockets, you were actually trying to play an instrument or dance or sing. And given a Kenku can actually mimic things, that would probably make the most sense. Um, Tool proficiencies automatically you get disguise kit, which on a Kenku would probably be hilarious. They have a huge beak. I don't know how that would work. Walking around with a plague doctor mask all the time, probably. And then you get to pick something else. Alchemist supplies, bagpipes, brewer supplies. Again, these are things you could pick. Being raised in the streets, let's say dice set. Played a lot of dice. Um, City secrets. Secret patterns and flows to cities. Can find passages through the urban sprawl that others would miss. When you are in combat, you and your companions you lead can travel between any two locations in the city twice as fast as your speed would normally allow. Right? So again, you get all of these extra little skills, suggested characteristics. Now, before when it was like personality traits and stuff like that, this is where they are. Again, you can find these in the player books, but personality traits. I hide scraps of food and trinkets away in my pockets, and this would be something to help you role play. Right? It's just constantly just putting stuff in your pockets, eating it, at random times. You ask lots of questions. You like to squeeze into small places. I don't like to bathe. Again, you can either roll a d8 and randomly choose these, or you can just look at the list to pick one. Right? They are very helpful. What are your ideals? Your aspirations? I'm going to prove that I'm worthy of a better life. And again, this is something that drives your character. If you're a story-driven character, this is something that helps, again, make them three-dimensional. Bonds, who are you close to? What are the things that actually drive you in that sense? And then flaws. Again, flaws are, you can't be the perfect person, right? It's like everybody has some kind of flaw, even in a fantasy world, right? So these are some of the things that you can choose from. If I'm outnumbered, I will run from a fight. Imagine what that would look like in the middle of an actual battle during D&D, right? I'd rather kill someone in their sleep than fight fair. That makes you a little suspect, right? But again, these are some things that you can choose, and then again, you get character details. This your alignment. You You can pick your alignment. You can leave it blank if you like. Your faith, if you decide to choose one. Again, this would be something you talk with your DM about. Lifestyle. This is essentially how you live your life, based on both your upbringing and the money you have in your pocket, right? What does that mean? If you're squalid, you live in a leaky stable. Most people at this lifestyle level have suffered some terrible setbacks. They might be disturbed, marked as exiles, or suffer from disease, right? Again, these are things to help guide you. They're not hard rules that you have to follow. It just kind of helps you define your character. And again, player characteristics: hair, skin, eyes. Again, this gives you more detail. You can fill all of this in, your personality traits. When you actually, here on D&D Beyond, when you actually pick these, where it says add, it will pop up and show up here. And then notes. These are organizations, allies, enemies, your actual backstory, other. And other is a good place to actually put things in your backpack that are not normally found in the game, right? It's a good place to put all that stuff. All right, so moving on, and now it's your equipment. And again, these are things that you'll go over with your DM. Does your equipment actually fit in with the starting equipment they try to give you, or do you need starting equipment that lines up more with your background? Right? Those are the things that you'll have to decide. And here in D&D Beyond, you can actually find the items that you can actually have. Currency is here: platinum, gold. You can add this up. Electrum, silver, copper. Copper, the pennies of the D&D world. But this is how you'll manage all of those things. So just so you can see when we get to the actual character sheet what that looks like, we're gonna go with starting equipment. We're gonna say they have a short sword, a short bow, and a quiver of 20 arrows. Most likely a burglar's pack. Leather armor, 2 daggers, and thieves' tools. And again, this will be something that you decide with your DM if this makes sense. They start with a small knife, a map of the city they grew up in, a pet mouse, a token to remember your parents by, and again, you can unclick or click them again based on your backstory. Set of common clothes and a pouch containing 10 gold. Right? So add starting equipment, and boom. Now here in D&D Beyond, it's a little weird. You have to make sure, even though you just put all this stuff in your bag, doesn't mean that your character's wearing them or using them. So you have to actually click use for your weapons so you can see exactly what the rolls will be and what the damage will be. And make sure that you put your armor on, because that's going to help you with your that's going to help you with everything. Your short sword, your short bow. All right, now all that's equipped. Good to go. Now we're going to look at the character sheet and see what exactly Lebowski is good at. Lebowski has a terrible armor class of 12. All right, Lebowski is very easy to hit, as we said, because he's pretty clumsy and sickly. And here, strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence. Now you can see what your these right here are considered your modifiers, right? You see 18, your wisdom is 18, that means you're plus 4. Your strength is 11, you don't have a modifier. Your dexterity is 12, you get a plus 1, right? Now, here are the things, these modifiers affect everything on this character sheet. Okay? So your hit, right? This is what you will, when you roll a d20, you will add 3 when you throw a dagger, right? This is the damage that you will do. 1d4 plus 1, right? Now, as your strength goes up, as your dexterity goes up, these numbers change. Your dexterity goes up, your armor class goes up. Now the modifier, and only because of the modifiers. Now the modifiers only go up every 2 times. So you see, starting at the number 10. So if you're at 10, as you can see here, it's +0. 11 adds nothing, but if this changed to a 12, modifier for strength would be +1. If it was 14, it would be +2, and so on and so forth. As you can see, 18 gives you a +4 modifier. 16, only 3. Right? So these are the things you have to decide as your character moves forward. What numbers are important? Do you want to actually add and increase things in that? These are very important things that, again, is it story driven, or do you want to get the most that you can out of the character as a to min max all of their abilities, right? And again, as you can see, all of these numbers affect your skills, what you're proficient in, right? Your deception, Lebowski's deception is +5. That is really good. So probably pretty good at deceiving people. Perception +6, right? These are the things that are going to help when you use these skills in the game. Right? Here's your proficiencies in your language, and again, this is the D&D character sheet. But all of these things that you see here, you can find on the physical D&D character sheet. Places for your equipment. You can see here. D&D just makes it very easy to do all of these things. The inventory. If you have items that need to be attuned to you, like magic items, this is the place you do it. Your backstory, your features and traits, some of your class features, your racial traits, all of these things. Very easy to find, but again, you can put them on your regular D&D book, D&D character sheet. All right, so we've covered building your backstory. We've covered talking with your DM and getting that backstory approved, building your character, coming up with a really well-rounded character. You've built your character, put everything together in a character sheet. Then you start playing the game, and you hit level 3, and your DM throws a mod at you, an adventure, and there is the very real possibility of player death. Now, I'm gonna do something real quick. I'm just gonna switch over very quickly. Now, here's the thing. I tell my players, and I told my players at the beginning of this current campaign, that the training wheels are off. The last campaign that we played, they were all fairly new players. And much like Spider-Man says, everybody gets one. So when some of the players actually did die, there were mechanics I had set into the game that allowed for them to actually come back. That are not necessarily built into the current game, the way the system works. Now, interestingly enough, I did tell them at the beginning when we started this new campaign that the training wheels are off, and that there is the very real possibility of actual permadeath for their characters, in the sense that they will not come back. They can't come back, at least not right away, and they need to start thinking in terms of backup characters. I pause for a couple of reasons. Now, it's one thing to actually tell your players, hey, there's a real possibility of death in this game. Come up with a backstory, come up with, just like a backup character. And when I say come up with a backup character, I don't mean like a full, like what we just did. I don't mean coming up with the backstory or like detail all those like details, but just come up with something general that should your character die, you are ready to go and build something that you're not having on the fly having to come up with something. You can tell your characters, you can tell your players that. They might say, okay, yeah, sure. But they never really believe it until it happens. And um, to spoil, I don't want to spoil it. If you haven't seen the last D&D game that we did right before Thanksgiving, don't want to spoil anything. So I will give you a moment to stop watching and go watch that now. And then you can come back to this later. But we did have a character death in the last game. I will apologize to my wife yet again. Yes, your death was epic, dear. But it was interesting to say the least because a number of reasons. Now, I did give the players opportunities to assist when she was taking the actions that she took to lead her that led to her death. Um, those opportunities weren't taken. There were, unfortunately, the roll of the dice that also contributed to this. But when these things happen, there are certain things that happen between the DM, the player that it is immediately affecting, and then the players as a whole, the group. And it bears actually talking a little bit about now because you just saw how in depth and again it could be, I mean, a really good character building session before the pandemic. You'd have people come over. It was like a party. People would come over. Your players would come over. You order some food. People would be drinking. You'd be having a good time. And then the DM would be sitting down with each of the players, talking, just like I just talked with all of you, about everything we just discussed. More in depth, right? And it's fun. Like that session, that building that session, and that's not necessarily a session zero. Some DMs use that as a session zero. That's not what I call a session zero. Session zero is when the character is in place, the character is built, the backstory is already done, and I actually do a session with the players leading up to the game. That's my session zero. But in that instance, yeah, it's a party. It's a lot of fun, and it's an all day thing. Like it's like all day because you're sitting down with multiple people and you're answering questions and everybody's passing around the books. It's fun. I miss that, but it's so much fun, right? And everybody's passing around the books and they look at, oh, this feat is great for your character, or you know what, let me ask you this, and then it's just a back and forth all day. It's so much fun. And then your character dies, right? You start to get this, you start to build an attachment to your character, and then your character dies in the game. It's rough, but it's important. I'll put it to you this way. I'm going to give it to you from the DM perspective first. The DM perspective is this, at least again for me. The perspective is this. It's important to be honest and truthful to the story. It's also important to use what the dice tell you, because the dice are there as that random The randomness of life are the dice, right? Um, all the random things that happen in a D&D game are mostly because of the dice. You could have the best constitution, you could have the best dexterity, you could be the stealthiest player in the world, but if you roll a natural one, you fail. And that's what the dice are there for. The dice are an important part of the story element. To not use them is not use what the dice tell you is not fair to your players, and it's not fair to you as a GM. Player death, in my estimation, is important for a number of reasons. It brings a certain gravity to the game that may not have been there. It helps to drive the story forward in ways that the players themselves could not have foreseen. Because, and especially for this group of players, they came into the game as strangers. And there was nothing that really united them, and up until this point, while they had some scares, they, for the most part, came through unscathed up until now. So now I come back to what I initially said. Even though your players may say, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, we could possibly die. Okay, we get it, we get it." It really doesn't sink in. It really doesn't hit them until something like this happens. And I think that's important too, because that is going to affect how they play their character. How does this death actually affect the character? I am thankful to my lovely wife, who basically told me when I apologized profusely for what happened. Who told me, it's like, well, she was only level 3, right? So she really didn't get that attachment to her character than if she had been playing her longer, which is true, but it's still impactful for another reason, because the way I write my stories, the way I write my games, just because that character dies doesn't mean that life doesn't continue for the people in that character's life. So if that character had parents, if that character had siblings, if that character belonged to a group, their life continues in the game. And there may be things that happen in the game. There may not be, but it would depend on what the characters actually decide to do moving forward. These are all like really important things that happen when a character dies. It also gives us pause to think about how we, as individuals, think about death. Think about the choices that we make in life and how that affects the people around us. Again, granted, this is a game and these are fantasy characters and they're all fake, but the players are friends and family. We all care about each other on some level, and so it does affect everyone differently. And even through games, I think it's very, very important that sometimes our games help us deal with things in our lives, in our reality. So player death, while it sucks for some players and especially for some DMs, I don't actively go out there to kill my characters. I go out there to challenge them. Unfortunately, sometimes the challenges are not met, and the players have to decide: do we run? Do we are we diplomatic, or do we just fight till our last breath? Those are things that they have to decide. But again, I think gaming, depending on the types of gaming that we do, they do help us reflect and think about the people that we are, what we, how we react to things in life. Those are definitely the things that I think player character death brings to the table. Even though, my dear, your character was only level 3, um, your character's death was, yeah, as you said, was pretty epic the way it happened, and it had meaning to you as a player and as your character. Didn't seem your character knew what was happening to them, yet their last words were still "save them," which meant that you weren't asking them to save you. You were asking them to save those individuals. That says a lot about your character, both yours and the one that just died. So, yeah, player character death, um, should never shrink away from it. DMs are known to fudge certain roles, to make things happen for their characters, to make sure that the game continues to be fun. Um, I am not one of those DMs. You can ask my players. If I roll crappy, I roll crappy. Um, but if I roll, you know, nat 20s and uh, characters unfortunately pay the price in those instances, I roll with those too. Um, the dice are meant to be used, and they're meant to be used in that way. Um, yeah, yeah. It's sometimes I'll roll and I'll have some terrible rolls, and it'll be because they cursed my die. They cursed my dice. So that's really, I mean, again, it's I really miss the days of I really miss the days of us being able to get together and building our characters together. But it's really important that when you put these characters, again, just kind of a recap. When you're building your characters, the process itself should be fun, right? At no point in time, except for the dungeon master, should any of this feel like work, right? Granted, there's also fantasy math. There's lots of fantasy math, right? That's part and parcel of the game itself. Um, but the process should be fun. Putting a character together, coming up with the idea of your character, coming up with a backstory. There's lots of resources, and I'll be sharing the resources that we talked about today on the on our Discord. So if you haven't joined our Discord, that now's a good time for that, especially if you want So, but a quick search on Google could find those things just as easily. But we want to make it easy for you. Make sure just have those all in one place that you can find them. Um, and you know, have fun. I mean, that's just the. I mean, if you take anything away from any of these talks that I have, is just you need to have fun, especially nowadays. Try and get out of your own headspace a little bit, and whether that's just putting pencil to paper and writing everything out, or drawing up your character, or paying someone else to draw up your character, to kind of bring that to life for you. Um, do what makes you happy. Do what brings you joy and makes this fun for you. This process for you fun. And once you do that, everything else is a piece of cake when it comes to the game. Uh, you just have to expect your DM to challenge you pretty much every step of the way when you're playing the game. Um, but that's what makes a great story. That's what makes a great game, and that's what builds friendship. We're all of us are building stronger friendships through these games. Just whether it's like talking to each other in between games, or the players themselves, like, oh, it was really cool when I did this, or oh, I really loved when your character did it. That was so awesome. Those are the things that really bring people together. Hey, sweetie, and there goes, and that's my daughter, Lady Poopsie, right there. How you doing, sweetie? These are all the things that are super important when it comes to gaming. If you're not having a good time, if something is challenging in a way that you feel like shouldn't be challenging to you, that's when you need to stop and talk to your DM. Right? Try and figure out what it is about the process or about the game itself that is making it not fun for you. And I keep saying it, the responsibility of the DM is to make sure that they listen to their players. And when I say listen, I don't mean just hear. I mean actually listen to what they're saying. There are too many DMs who will do the lip service of going, uh-huh, yeah, okay, sure, and then change nothing. And you will wind up with frustrated players. You wind up with players who leave your game, and that is definitely on you. Now, if you've done as a DM, if you've listened to your players and you've made changes, and excuse me, and the player is still not having a good time, then as a player, you need to examine what you could be doing to make things a little better. But again, this is all a collaborative process. Whether building the character, building the story, playing the game, all of it's collaborative. It is not the players against the DM. It is the DM and the players building a story and building a game together. That should be the mentality of it. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It's futile for me to actually say don't grow attached to your characters. There are lots of characters that I've built over the years that I still have attachments to, even though I haven't played them in so many years. But player death happens. TPK, total party kill, happens. That is a natural part of the game. But as long as you trust your DM and your DM trusts you as players and what your reactions may or may not be, then you'll be able to pull through those instances together. And that's what you need to do. Because that could have went a very different way. And granted, I know my wife. I didn't think she was gonna come into the next room and clock me in the head, but I felt like I deserved it. And there are going to be those players who are so attached to their character that they will get pissed off and they'll be upset and they'll be angry. Just take a minute, like walk away, take a deep breath, and relax. It's never personal when these things happen. Trust me. Yeah, you're as I said, your DM is not there to at least a good DM is not there to go out of their way to kill you. Um, but yeah, it is absolutely a thing. Even the best player who's grown emotionally attached to their character will get pissed and upset and angry. Just need to walk away. Need to take a minute um, and figure out what you can do, and then as soon as the game is done, not too soon after, start building your new character with your DM. And then you never know. Sometimes your next character might wind up being your most favorite character. You don't know. Um, but yeah, it's player death is something that everybody needs to expect, but not anticipate. Is the best way to put it. And that's pretty much kind of character development in a nutshell. Um, as I said, I could go more in depth on the feats and things like that, but each of those sections, and again, you shouldn't let this intimidate you, but each of those sections could be a 2 hour talk in it. It's so in depth. My goal here was just to kind of give you a general overview of what to expect, of how to build a character for D&D, um, player concepts that you could take and use on any tabletop game. That was kind of my goal here today, and I hope that some of you got something from it. Picked up something that you may have not, or maybe you had some of your some things that you thought you were the only one who did. Maybe you got some confirmations of, oh yeah, great, somebody else thinks the same way I do. Um, Trust me, I feel that. I feel that a lot. Making sure that I'm not the crazy one that thinks this way, right? I hope that I was able to kind of confirm or give you affirmation on some of the concepts or things that you believed should be done during character development or character creation. And again, I'm speaking from my own experience. There are DMs who do things completely different. Um, but generally, I feel all the things that I just said, all the things that I'm kind of conveying, I feel are the best ways to move forward as a DM and as someone who wants to make a fun game for my friends and for other people. So I hope you feel the same way too. Because again, being a DM can be daunting. It is a big responsibility. If you are a DM and don't feel a responsibility towards your players, or to challenging them, or making the best story that you can, I think maybe you should reevaluate being a DM. I think you should maybe go back to your roots and become a player again and see what made the most fun for you. Especially if you're one of those antagonistic DMs that sees the game as you versus your players. If you are definitely in that mind frame, put yourself in the player's shoes and ask yourself, would that be fun for you? That's how I kind of think of all these things. That's a good. Um, but yeah, I if there's any questions, if anybody has anything on character development or player death or comments, questions, this is what I'm here for. Let's have a discussion. That's even that goes for my lovely wife and beautiful daughter as well. 'Cause I know sometimes they're like, I don't know what dad thinks, or I don't know what my husband's thinking. If I can say it without spoiling anything for you guys, I can do that. Oh yes, you are. You are absolutely having another session zero. This is you're having a completely different character. So wow, what a cop out! I love everything about this game. Yeah, no. Um, every time a character is created for my game, my players should always expect a brand new session zero. Because again, in that session zero, you are going to figure out if you actually enjoy your character concept. Is there something that you want to change? Is there something you didn't like? Was there something confusing that you need me to elaborate on? Session zero is a great place for that. It also starts to put you in the mindset of your new character and not the one who's dead. I hate saying it like that. Yeah, session zero, yeah, is great for building those character concepts. That is a big, that is a big, that is the biggest tool a DM has in their tool belt is is session zero, because not only are you figuring out your new character and how to play that character and all the concepts, you figure out what's motivating them and all that stuff. Me as the DM, I start to figure out how you're going to do all of that stuff as well. And in doing that, it makes a big difference for the game. No, I wanna. Yeah, I don't. I want to keep. I want to keep her new character concept, uh, uh, basically secret until it actually happens in the game because the other players don't know either. I don't want to spoil it for them. So I like for that new spread. And again, since all of the characters in this particular game have decided to come into the game not knowing each other, I think this is like the best. This is the best way to do that. Um, they get to learn about this brand new person again. You know, so but and here's the interesting part. Yeah, here's the interesting part is we are also going to depending on the current players in the game, it will be dependent on the current players in the game as to when she actually brings her new character into the game. Depending on the actions. So we'll see. It could be next game if the players decide to do a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with this new character. Uh, it might be the game after. It's going to be completely dependent on them when she shows up. She's not exactly going to just pop up. So we'll see what happens. So yeah. So yes, my dear, we'll be doing your session 0 this week before the game starts. Yeah, not to push it or anything, but yeah, our normal D&D sessions, our games are on Twitch every Thursday at 7:30. We didn't have a game last Thursday because of Thanksgiving. Um, but yeah, if you're interested, you can do that. You can catch up on some of the episodes that you've missed, some of the streams on our YouTube page. Um, we basically I basically put up the other streams on YouTube, and yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna say it right now, officially, on stream, so everybody knows, including my players. No spoilers. Uh, and my players, if you share anything in the stream, in the chats, that's gonna be completely on you. It's not gonna be coming from me. But I told you that I don't want you to, so you know, don't fuck with the DM. Yeah, the big joke. The big joke is one of the big jokes is every time my players fuck with me, I do actually have a running list of every time and who fucked with me, and I don't know. It may or may not add hit points to something they fight. You know, maybe I don't know. Yeah, but that's I again. It really comes down to the players talking with the DM and all of it being collaborative. It really comes down to that. That's how you're gonna have that's how you're gonna have maximum fun. Maximum fun comes from everybody working together and having a good time. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Yeah, the DM Santa list. Yeah, it's actually my naughty list, right? My nice list, and it hasn't happened yet. Oddly enough, my nice list is when I start granting out inspirations to people. It hasn't happened in this game yet. I did it a couple of times in the last game. But the DM inspiration would absolutely be uh, the nice list, and the fucking with the DM is my naughty list. So absolutely. Oh, that's actually, thank you for that, Bemroth. I think I'm actually that might be something I actually add to the stream for the holiday season. Because I'm actually messing and playing with the overlays a little bit for the holiday season, to add in some things. So I might actually do that. That's a great. Thank you for that. I think that might actually be a great idea. I appreciate that. So yeah, so to kind of wrap up this evening, yeah, I absolutely will. I absolutely will do that. So to kind of wrap up, I hope I hope that I was a little bit educational about building a character, character concepts, whether it's D&D or other tabletop games. If you're starting a D&D character, I hope this was at least a little bit helpful for you. If you are using D&D Beyond with your campaign, that is going to be very, very helpful, but not necessary. The player's handbook, and whatever books your DM is using for the game can easily be used for that. Everything we talked about today will be in our Discord. Links for all of those things will be there, including the character sheets for dyslexic players, and the other links that we discussed. Um, really hope that I brought something to your day today. I hope that was a little helpful. I hope you were at least at the very least entertained with some of the shenanigans that we talked about. I hope you learned a little insight about player death and how it could actually be a good thing for your game, depending on the situation. And I want to thank everybody for supporting us and supporting the stream, supporting what we do. It's really, really appreciated. Thank you again. Um, I will say, as always, be good to yourself, be good to others, take care of others, and more importantly, take care of yourself. Until next time.